Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
and a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human,
the latest in social science, psychology, and American culture,
and what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
All right, here we're back for episode 2, I guess, right?
Yeah, the first one went on a little long, so if you stuck through it and you're back for more,
Thank you.
Here we are. Yeah.
Thank you. Here we are, Kelley and Erin. Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley.
Hey. So today we're going to talk about awe, the new science of everyday wonder and how it can transform your life. The book by Dr. Keltner. Yeah, so I'm super excited about this conversation. I have so many thoughts, but let's just start. I'm going to define awe according to Keltner. So awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends our current understanding of the world. Okay, I'm going to say that one more time.
Yeah.
Awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends your current understanding of the world. So let me just start by asking you, Erin, how does that resonate with you in your sense of understanding of the metaphysics of, like, the world?
Yeah.
That's not a small question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just a small one to start with.
Like, throw this out, this softball. It'll be.
Sorry.
Really...
I mean, as a theist, can you buy that? Do you buy, or as an atheist, do you buy that definition that there's transcendence and vastness, and that it can lead to a better understanding of the world?
Yeah, I think I don't think those things are incompatible.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you can experience vastness in a lot of different ways, and therefore, like, experience, right, that transcendence. But that vastness, I think nature is a good example, right, there where that comes into play, right? You feel that space, when I see a mountain range and you feel the smallness of being in the presence of that, or you go out to the country, which is where I grew up, right? And you're under this brilliantly starry sky, and you're like, I'm just this little speck, right, in all of this. Or, being in front of the ocean. Like, there's just, like, so many powerful forces in nature that are there to remind you that you are such a small thing and it's a humbling in a way that is important. I think when we talked last time about some of the things that we worry about with contemporary culture, I think a scholar that I think has been really important in the last decade is a woman named Jean Twenge. And she wrote a book called The Narcissism Epidemic. And I think that one of the things that are the digital overlay that has accompanied our life, I think it predates the digital overlay, but the digital overlay sort of has, like, exploded this, but is that, everybody's personal brand, or that that everything is about them, right? That's how they sort of see the world. And that is one of the things that's antithetical, I think, to experiencing awe, because to experience awe is to know that it's not all about you. Yeah. Like, it's like taking off that cloak of self-consciousness and self-righteousness and self-obsession that I think that our capitalistic culture and our intertwined with that digital overlay encourages. Yep. Like, and that's one of the things I think that young people are struggling with is, like, well, maybe some people are saying, hey, this is how you experience the good life, right? Like, be in situations where you get to experience awe. But then, like, another part of their culture is, like, take these photos of yourself on the mountain and post them on Instagram so that everyone can be jealous of the fact that you were on the mountain, right?
Yes.
And so,
which totally just has to defeat the experience of awe, right?
Bingo.
Yeah.
So, I
am a little guilty of.
Yeah, I think it's hard to not be, right? Like, I think it is that we are designed as a human animal to not want to be, kind of going back to my upbringing, right? And that desire to not be ostracized from your community.
Yeah.
And why? Like, why do we not want to be ostracized from our community? Because we are actually pack animals. That, what does that mean if you are on the outside of the herd? What does that mean? You're the most likely to get killed.
You're gonna die.
Yeah. So we
which
desire.
is what in our nervous system, right, is the feeling of overwhelm, right?
Yeah.
And when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel anxious, in our bodies feel like we're gonna die.
Yeah. Whether or not that's
it's not logically true,
right?
but...
So it's like, now it's not the lion on the savannah or whatever that's like trying to kill me. That it's like an actual threat of death. Now you have this biological response to things that, like, you're like, what? Like, this is not actually a threat, but it feels like a threat.
Yes.
So my wife was saying this the other day, because she's like, has all these patients that come in with, I think POTS is the term, and I don't know, Justin, if you want to look it up, what the actual clinical like phrase is. But she was like, when I was trained as a doctor, like, this is one of those psychosomatic things, but it actually causes people real physiological problems.
Yeah.
And she's like, this is like not real. Like, what is this, right? And so what is it?
It's a mind-body disorder.
Really?
But she's like,
POTS is a mind-body disorder because it is a condition with both physiological and psychological symptoms that are caused in part by abnormal release of chemical mediators known as neurotransmitters in the brain and other parts of the body.
And so people are coming in with pain.
Yeah, like
that is psychosomatic.
Yes, correct. And she was saying to me, she goes, it's almost like people are having an allergic reaction to our current culture in a way, right? Wow. Like your system, like in a way, it's like, oh my God, I've never experienced this novel like thing, and my immune system is reacting. It's like attacking my own body because it doesn't know how to respond to like what it's encountering, and that, I think, is what is going on. Like, there's this certain level, like when we look at all these rates of depression, anxiety, blah blah blah. It has to do with almost like an over response of the immune system to something that like we are not biologically conditioned to.
So what Keltner would say in his book is that so there's the default system, right? And the default, there's like a neurological name for it, but the default self is the self that we need in order to exist in the world, in order to get a job, in order to get from my house to the grocery store. Like, we need the default system in order to function.
Yeah.
But when the default self becomes the only or the overriding self, when we don't have time to allow for silence and stillness and conversation and walking in the woods and these things that we're talking about, right? Like, what happens is we get anxious, we get depressed, and there's this override, right? And so it is 100% physical, 100% psychological, and it is the actual what Keltner would say is the vagus nerve that allows our bodies to regulate and to get back to a place of openness and calm, and a place where we can experience the world in a balanced way. Yeah. And awe is one of the things that gets us there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just got a memo from our producer. So it's postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and that's what she was saying. It's your heart literally. It's measurable. Like, you are actually having like an episode, like a physiological episode,
because our vagus nerve, which we're going to cross-reference here. Please go to On Being and listen to the episode of Krista Tippett interviewing Dr. Keltner. He doesn't call it this. Actually, Resmaa Menakem, who wrote My Grandmother's Hands, who writes about generational trauma and generational racial trauma. He calls the vagus nerve our soul nerve. And so the vagus nerve goes from the root of our brain all the way down our spine from our heart into our heart, all the way down through our organs into our bellies, where it interacts with our like microorganisms in our bellies. So this nerve like affects everything.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that our psychological state affects our bodies, we are embodied people. And like, this is how we're created.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of astonishing, right? And so, of course, people are coming in with psychosomatic symptoms. And I don't even know, like, is psychosomatic actually, like, is that redundant? Like, our psycho is somatic.
Yeah, right.
Like,
right.
You're just coming in with somatic symptoms. Yeah. They might be psychologically triggered, but yeah, I mean, it's craziness.
It is. Well, so what you were saying before about the like
awe.
Awe, and also but like being able to be in stillness and then with other people in nature. And experience awe. So the way that you phrase that is perfection, which is Henry David Thoreau in The Three Chairs.
Yes.
So
which he has a whole chapter in here about.
Does he really? Okay,
Yes.
I have the book, but I haven't finished it. I think I've only listened to maybe like the first 2 or 3 chapters. So you're ahead of me. But so this concept. So I read about it in there's an MIT professor named Sherry Turkle who writes about that in her book called Reclaiming Conversation as conversation as sort of a healing space, right?
Yes.
And so her contention was that she obviously teaches at MIT, which is a technology school.
Yeah.
But certainly was, and this book I think she published in 2015. So even kind of ahead of, our contemporary, like, oh, wow, this has turned into a dumpster fire. She sort of saw like, hey, this is going to turn into a dumpster fire. And but her thing was the way that she frames the book is on this concept of the 3 chairs. So that technology disrupts our ability to really attend to any of these well. And so the first is solitude. So the solitude as in the joy of being alone as opposed to the pain of being alone. And if we're plugged in all the time, we never create any space for quiet contemplation, right? Like we're always listening to something or scrolling something. Like we're never just unplugged, being just existing, right? Like, and actually that the most creative thinking comes when we're not plugged into something. It's kind of why like people are always like, oh, I have this great idea in the shower, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not, for like a second, my mind is wandering. And if you don't give time for your mind to wander, it doesn't make these like connections in from your subconscious. So, and she's like, so if people can't be alone, like they're fucked. Like if you can't be alone, that means that you cannot be with other people well, and therefore you cannot be in society well, which are the other 2 chairs. So second chair is companionship as or friendship, right? Which is friend, family, romantic partner. And then the last chair is society. So which she sort of articulates as educational spaces, work spaces, and like the culture at large. Yeah. So but it all sort of is like that our relationship to technology is disrupting all of those chairs, like our ability. And she said, if there's a 4th chair, or when that's what Thoreau would say, the 4th chair is to once he felt like we've had a conversation that fills all the chairs, let's go out into nature and take a walk, right? And so to find that space of awe.
I love that. So these things that you're talking about. So as a theist, right, and from my theistic perspective, so what I was taught is this idea of revelation, right? Like we have revelation from God. God reveals God's self through certain things, and that our primary way that God reveals God's self is through the Bible, right? And through stories, through these storytellings. But special revelation is nature. And so we know, we understand that there is some kind of primary mover because we walk and we see the vastness of the ocean and we see the vastness of a cornfield and we see the intricacies of the root structures of a tree, that brings us to that. So it's I think it's interesting that these things are, compatible, and that example too of these chairs. There's also a very kind of iconic image of the Trinity, which, the God, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, where there's these kind of it's an icon where there's these chairs and then there's an empty chair. And it's, God, the Son, Christ, and then the Spirit, and then there's an empty chair, kind of for you as being at the table. So I think it's interesting that these images are these kind of, perhaps these kind of Jungian, right, archetypal images of like what is important, community, conversation, stillness, authenticity, connection.
Yeah, and that's the heart of what all of these philosophies are trying to get at, right? I mean, that is how do we live in a way that we have meaning and purpose? And that is the heart of, we talk about like living the good life, or like, living a good life. And I think that our current culture misses the mark on, which is, and some of this is that grinding capitalism that we referenced before, but is this desire to, I have to be happy all the time. Yeah. And like
toxic positivity, right? As opposed to like a common good, which my happiness might have to be, circumvented for the common good. Yeah. Right. And we don't think about that.
Well, so what I was going to say, that is very true. That's very true. No, we don't. And we talked about earlier, like rugged individualism as like a key ethos of American culture. And so that in and of itself sort of is antithetical to one of the ways that we experience awe, which is it being in community. But I think that relentless pursuit of happiness, or the chase of like the dopamine hit, right, is also sort of antithetical to that. Because when we think about the neurotransmitters that make us happy, right, dopamine is a selfish reward system, right? Whereas serotonin and oxytocin are communal.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I have a friend who just told me that her therapist told her that she needed to forego the dopamine for the oxytocin. Yeah. She's like, you need to start getting that community, hit as opposed to the dopamine hit.
Which and here's the other part of that I wanted to say, which was that happiness, the chase of happiness. It misses the mark, because what a good life is actually the chase, or the embodiment of trying to live a life of meaning and purpose, which you actually get from not being happy all the time. Like you can't
100%.
You can't get
yes. I'm clapping. I'm applauding. I'm going to stand up if I wouldn't go off mic, I would be standing up right now. Yes.
But I mean, it's like the things that give you meaning and purpose are the things that are hard. Yes. Like they're the things that if anybody else could do it, then like it wouldn't be something that like means anything, right? It's the things that are like, think about like raising children. Man, we've both raised children. So raising children is fun. It's hard. It's
not fun.
It's hard.
It's not fun. I mean, it can be fun at times.
Yeah,
but.
there are moments, but it's hard.
Yes.
But the hard is what makes it great. If it wasn't hard, like everybody would do it. So that's the But I think you can apply that. I think that, people who are parents get that, but that you can apply that to a lot of things, right? If someone who writes a book, like it's fucking hard, right? It's hard, and it takes discipline and effort. I think anything that's really meaningful takes discipline and a lot of effort, and it's not easy, but that's what makes it great. The hard is what makes it great.
So you're gonna get sick of me quoting Rohr, but I'm gonna quote Rohr a lot because He's
he's
been
your
my
he's
teacher
your
for a while. But so one of the things he says is that like the things that stir transformation, the things that are the impetus for transformation in our lives are great love and great suffering.
Yeah.
And the things that the suffering that we don't transform, we transmit, right? So it's not just suffering in and of itself as suffering, right? Like I don't want to idealize suffering, but when we take suffering and when we can transform it and learn from it and grow from it, not in I'm optimizing myself and I'm becoming better and, but like this is really changing me, then we have something to offer somebody else, right? We have something to offer our community and we're wiser for it. That's really powerful. I think that's and it's true. I mean, it really is like those are the things that shake us out of the passivity of life that I think often sort of happens, right? Yeah.
It's like,
I don't want to be just like, I don't want to just like receive what comes. Like, I don't want to be a victim, right? And suffering is not about victimhood. Suffering is about like, this has happened and how do I metabolize this and be transformed by it. And, we're in a season right now. This past week is Ash Wednesday and we're in a season of Lent and Lent, I never grew up kind of really practicing Lent. Lent was always like did you grow up practicing Lent?
We did. Yeah.
You did Fish Fridays?
I sure did. Fish Fridays and, got the ashes on the forehead and whole.
Did you usually give something up?
Yeah. We were supposed to give something up. I don't even remember.
Did you?
I'm sure I did, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We always now we're always like, okay, we're going to be, this isn't like a Lent thing, but we're like, let's be a vegan for a month or let's be a vegetarian for a month or whatever.
Which is, again, this idea of like optimizing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to try on this discipline for a month, right? Yeah. And yet, that's not really what it's about. And there's a great Thomas Merton quote about Lent is about preparing our hearts to be loved for the Easter season, right? And in preparing our hearts to be loved, we have to let go of anything that can't exist in the same room with mercy. So just think about that. What can't exist in the same room with mercy? So,
what can't exist in the same room with mercy? What do you?
Resentment, anger, judgment. So it's not gluten, right? So this is what I wrote about this week. It's not gluten. It's not like wine.
Yeah.
I have a lot of, I'm not a giver upper, so I don't do a lot of that. But I have a friend who just told me, she's like, I'm giving up junk thoughts for Lent. And I was like, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's good.
It's like resentment on herself, right? And again, we've talked about, and we'll probably reference a lot of like 12-steppy things, but like when you let go of those things that kind of keep us from feeling the things that are really going on, those things that distract us. Like if I were to actually give up my phone, which my husband would love me to do, I'm sure I would be really, really uncomfortable. Right?
You'd have to go through like a literal
detox.
Because you're
it serves something for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there would be suffering in my life during Lent if I did not look at my phone.
Yeah.
And in that space of suffering, mercy would be there.
Yeah.
And there would be some kind of, I don't know, sense of ministering, if I'm using kind of those words, to that suffering, so that when Easter comes, I can like receive that love that is there.
Yeah.
So I'm talking kind of some spiritual shit here, but
that's good. It's good. I think thinking about it from the like a biological standpoint, right? I think there is a certain level of
detox.
That's what I'm saying. Right. It's okay, guys. Like, you think about like my when I think about like my wife in the emergency room, and there's, people who are like addicts or whatever. And it's like, they go through, it's like, okay, this is actually going to get worse before it gets better.
Yes.
Right. And that means that like, you're going to have to kind of, okay, we're going to give this up. And it's going to feel super shitty until your brain sort of stops craving the thing.
Yep.
But the other side of it's going to be really important, which I think is what you're talking about, right? It's like the other side is like, once I can get to the other side, then I'm actually in a space where
I have capacity.
I'm not just like hitting my dopamine system all the time. I have the capacity to be open to these other experiences to fill that space. Because,
and they'll say all the time, like when you when you do things that numb yourself so that you can't feel pain, you also can't feel the positive things, right?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, and here's the thing that, for me, neuroscience is the thing that supports spiritual practice for me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this actually like I can actually, chart this in my brain. Great. I think that's amazing. Yeah. So how about I think it might be interesting for people to know. So Keltner in his book, we kind of have gone off a little bit, but I love that we go off. He has these 8 ways that people experience awe.
Yeah. Do you want to just like lay them out real quick?
Yeah, I'm going to lay them out.
The eight ways are.
The 8 ways are. Let me see. I have.
So while you look for that, I'll give you like my little, intro on Keltner, which is that I know him because he has done research with Jonathan Haidt.
Yes.
And so Jonathan Haidt is a professor at NYU, professor of psychology, and he's amazing. I mean, he's written a ton of fabulous books: The Righteous Mind, The Coddling of the American Mind. And one of the things that they sort of, I think, were exploring together, which was, so Haidt would say that Homo sapien is 90% chimp, 10% bee.
Yes.
And what he says is, like, think about the human brain as sort of like mostly chimpanzee with like a hive overlay. And that our hive mind, is what he calls it, is activated in spaces where there's community.
Yep.
So like his example that he uses in The Righteous Mind is like, religion is a team sport, I think is the name of the chapter, or maybe the subhead, right? But it's like
it definitely is.
Yeah, the same thing. That's like, I'm in a University of Michigan football game, and we're against Ohio State as our rival, and I'm ready to murder the Ohio State fan or whatever over this like game. Is our hive mind being activated? And it's like, oh, you're wearing the jersey that matches my jersey. We're a team now. And like, even though I don't even know you, like we are connected in some way, and that there is power in that. So it kind of works in the same way.
That line, right? That line between community being something that is so like life-giving, and something that is being like
it's a tipping point.
We become like the massacre at Miley.
Yeah.
Miley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. It is. It can be, those things can be wielded for good or evil in a lot of ways. Like the things that it can also be something, can be something that gives life meaning and gives people a sense of meaning and purpose. It can also be weaponized for mass murder.
Yes.
Which actually, the other thing that was sort of interesting, there's a study that came out a couple of years ago that examined sort of like, are primates more murderous than other species? And surprise,
they are.
We are. We are. Like by a pretty
they
right.
Not.
Like we are. Right? Like by a fairly significant margin, we are like more murderous than other kinds of animals.
It's so interesting. I mean, it's sad. Okay. I'm going to give you the 8 wonders of life, but I'm also going to reference, since we're talking about primates here.
Yeah.
I think this is amazing. So he talks about this in the introduction. So he says, why awe? Okay, so he's talking about his hero, Jane Goodall. who studied, chimpanzees, for her entire life. She believed that chimpanzees feel awe and have a sense of spirituality grounded in a capacity Goodall described as being amazed at things outside yourself. Animated by this mystery, we'll investigate where the chills, tears, okay, he talks about this. But so evidently what Goodall talks about, what she found when she studied chimpanzees was that there was this thing called the waterfall dance. So when they experienced awe in nature, which is one of the 8 wonders of life, the 8 ways that we experience awe, they would actually kind of create this ritual where they would dance like in the presence of this waterfall for no other reason other than to luxuriate in the awe of this amazingness. Like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's awesome.
It's awesome,
I think,
right?
Yeah, and that goes back to the comment that I made in the first episode, which was that we are sort of
storytelling
animals, and the only ones as far as we know.
Yeah.
Because I think that as we get into this, I think you start to as scientists are exploring this, we recognize that while that animals may not have Twitter to share their to share their messages, that they are in fact communicating with each other in very profound and perhaps storytelling kind of ways. Justin, you got an anecdote on that.
The short end of it is that there's some PhD level research happening right now about whether or not whale communication, instead of just being the perfunctory like, hey, there's food here, or hey, let's mate, there's danger over there, but there might also be like long-term generational storytelling of like, let me tell the next generation these stories from what I experienced growing up and that kind of stuff. Like
oral tradition.
Oral traditions maybe being passed down in cetacean, whales, dolphins. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
There's some evidence that suggests that, and so I know there's some high-level research going into that. I don't know the details. I'm not smart enough to understand that.
Okay, on a much more banal kind of level, I saw an Instagram video the other day, yesterday of a little dog watching the scene from Lion King where Simba's killed Mufasa's killed and Simba's like, I hope I'm not like, I hope everybody's seen The Lion King by this point. But
you've ruined it.
I've ruined it. Yeah. But Simba's crying, right? And come on, Dad, get up, right?
Yeah.
And there's this dog watching the movie, and the dog is just looking at the screen and just crying, totally attentive, totally watching, and just you hear this sound of crying, and then all of a sudden Scar comes up and is like, blah, blah, and then he starts barking at Scar, and I was like, this dog.
No, is literally watching the show.
Is literally watching the show and reacting to it, emotionally reacting to this narrative.
Yeah.
Animals have got to have a sense of narrative. 100%.
I mean, we are animals with a sense of narrative,
right?
And that's it. So it's like should be a reminder in this spirit of awe that not only
that is awesome.
It's awesome, and then also we're all also not that special, and but
that's also awesome.
It is
because that's the thing that happens, right? So before I jump, so they did this study that he talks about in the book where he has these 2 groups of people. So he has people that are looking at this incredible, awesome view of Yosemite, and then he has people that are just at the fish market in San Francisco or something, right? And then he has these charts, these graphs that have a picture of a sun in the corner, and then he has these people after they've experienced this space, whether it's the market in San Francisco or this view in Yosemite, and he asks them to draw a picture of themselves and to write the word me. Well, if you look at these drawings, the people that are experiencing awe in Yosemite, their pictures, they draw themselves in
Super
these
small.
super small. And their word me is like super small. And then the picture of the people looking at the fish market are like, they're 3 times the size of the sun, in relation to the picture in the graph. And so this idea of smallness, right? Actually, when we feel small, we feel more connected.
Yeah.
Which, again, antithetical to American rugged individualism, right?
It is.
Like we have to let go of that. We are not big. We are not big. We will die.
Yeah.
We are not important.
Now, no, we aren't. And the question of like, what are the things that I worry about in terms of American culture or the future of American culture? I think I've said this to you before, but there was this study that was done that they surveyed teenagers in China and teenagers in America, and they asked them. So if you're not familiar with TikTok, so
if you've been living in a vacuum,
so TikTok in China is not the same as American TikTok, right? It is very regulated, meaning like, there's age gatekeeping, there's time limits, and the content in and of itself is not the same. So the content is mostly, it's like pro Chinese government, and then but it's like science videos and like educational materials, right? So in America, they did a survey of American teenagers, and they said, "What is your number one most aspirational career?" What do they say?
Influencer.
Bing, bing, bing. Yeah, influencer. In China, what is the most aspirational career?
To be, I have no idea.
Like an astronaut or a scientist.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's because
I'm like, I have no idea because I don't know what's aspirational. Outside of influencer.
Right. But that's my point is like the fact that like being an influencer is the number one career choice of the next generation. I mean, this is antithetical to experiencing awe, because to be like, I'm going to be an influencer is to try to make yourself big all the time. Or even if you don't think about yourself in that space,
make myself big all the time.
You're in the old Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message.
Yep.
If I'm using Instagram as a way, or whatever, TikTok, whatever, to become an influencer, that is shaping the way that I see and experience the world.
Yep.
And I'm going to see and experience the world as that I am the most important thing in it.
So that leads us perfectly to these 8 wonders of life, because so these are 8 ways that people experience awe.
Yeah.
And in order.
Okay.
And the number one way that people experience awe is what he calls moral beauty, which is witnessing other people's courage, kindness, strength, and overcoming. Yeah. Right? Like, it's not about, what you're doing on social media. It's about seeing other people's kindness and courage. And I just think that's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
That we experience awe through other people.
Yeah.
But not through other people in the way that
you want them to be your follower.
Yes. Yeah. Not about what shade of lipstick you're wearing that you've gotten so many followers. It's literally like courage, right?
Yeah.
So the second one is collective effervescence, which is the idea of rituals and community experiences. So this is like the football, football game, being in a football game.
Yeah.
It's religious ritual. It's dancing at a club.
Yeah.
It's being at a Beyonce concert.
Yeah.
It's just, Brene Brown talks about this a lot, like grieving and celebrating in community would be an experience of collective effervescence. Yeah. The third is nature, which obviously... Fourth is music, which he calls, and I love this definition, transporting people to a new dimension of symbolic meaning and experience. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's huge, right? Visual design, art, architecture, craft, and engineering. Standing at the base of the Empire State Building or the Eiffel Tower, you have a sense of awe. Yeah. 6 is spiritual and religious stories. So it's pretty much down the list. Mm-hmm. But I would say that the first 5
track into that.
into
totally
great spiritual story or spiritual experience. So spiritual and religious stories, including mystical awe and wonder of life and oneness. Last summer we went to St. Thomas, and we were on this like little beach, and there was a ton of like turtles. This is definitely nature, but I definitely felt this like idea of oneness. I was swimming, and all of a sudden Bill was like, look over there, look over there, look over there. And I just kind of like looked, and there was this huge turtle right in front of me. And I just started like crying in my mask. And it was just crazy. It was like, oh my God, like there is nobody here but me and this turtle.
Yeah.
And like, we're the same.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it was, okay, that was my cheesiness.
No, I dig it. I had when I was talking about the listening to the podcast about octopuses this morning. So one of my coworkers, Abby, her and her husband scuba dive, and she was like, I have had up close encounters with octopuses, and it is, you know, pretty wild, pretty wild. But she was also saying, like, you know, go back to the solitude, like that the reason they love that so much is because it's the only time that they are actually in solitude.
Yeah.
And
it's so quiet down there, right?
Yeah.
So the 7th one is life and death, the mysteries these experiences hold, and just, you know, and anybody who sat in the bedside or experienced, you know, the death of somebody or given birth or had, you know, I mean, those times are huge. And then the last one is epiphanies or sudden understandings, which is our jam for sure.
Totally.
Right?
Oh, wow. I did not think that's how the world worked. And now I totally just, you know, have a new way of looking at it. I think that's, it's, you know, I thrive on that. That is a huge part of what I think gives life meaning. And I am in awe of the people who are able to dedicate the time to do the research and the thinking to be able to articulate those things. I'm in awe of the people who are, you know, bold enough and creative enough to, you know, I don't know, take life and, like, you know, you think about somebody like a Charles Darwin who's like, I am out here on a limb and I am gonna, you know, influence the whole rest of humanity, the future of humanity. But I mean, thinking about, right, somebody who's like, we got real courage, right?
Yes.
You know, those are, it's cool. Ideas are the best.
Yes, ideas are the best. Erin and I are definitely, in awe of ideas. In the chapter he does on the evolution of awe, or the evolution of, and how he talks about Darwin and he talks about William James, you know, the father of psychology and modern psychology, and it's pretty wonderful what he talks about. And he talks about tears. He talks about, this chapter is called The Evolution of the Soul. Tears, chills, and woes. Like what? Like, whoa, right? And the tears are actually our way of connecting to something bigger.
Yes.
And I just wanted to share, like, so in this book is framed by, and he dedicates this book to his younger brother who died of colorectal cancer, and I think that's the kind of cancer he died of.
Yeah.
And he has this even in the introduction, he talks about kind of going to his brother, his sister-in-law called him and said, you know, this is it, this is the end. And we were on vacation just a couple weeks ago, and we were in this place of intense awe. We were at Joshua Tree, and we were like experiencing this massive beauty of nature and otherness, vastness. And yet there I was sitting on the couch, you know, of our Airbnb, and I was reading this book, and he's describing walking into the room, the hospital room, where his brother is dying and his family is around him. And just, he has this, the way he describes it is so stunning. He describes his dad is holding on to his brother's foot. And he says that, and I think he just says it like that. My dad was holding my brother's foot.
Yeah.
And I just started weeping. I just started weeping as I was reading this. And then he says in just like minute detail where every member of his family had their hand on his brother's body. And I thought, like, that's it. Like it wasn't poetry. It wasn't something that was going to change my life in terms of like giving me some great insight into death, but it was just this incredibly specific. It was the particular that led me to the universal awe of what it meant to die, and what it meant to sit with somebody in intense grief, and it was an astounding piece of writing. And so I felt like I experienced the beauty of awe just in reading his description of that. So I wanted to share that with you and with people who are listening, just to encourage them to read the book, but also that awe can be just simple and found in the everyday beauty of like life and death and sharing a meal and hugging a friend and being in presence, just being in presence with people without distraction is
that's it.
Worthy of awe.
Yeah, I think that is well said, and I think that is the perfect place to end this episode.
Atheist is produced by Justin Seiwell and Trend Media Productions. And we want to thank our listeners for joining us on this project. Be sure to subscribe to the Atheist Podcast found on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to give us a rating or a comment and share this episode with others. We really appreciate you help us growing our show.
On our next episode, we will host the Professor Belden Lane from St. Louis University, who will talk to us about the concept of awe and theology. Thank you for listening, and keep looking.